all, thank you all those who are in the middle of the night or very early in the morning. It means a lot. I hope I can make it short and interesting. So as Petra said, this is to explain a little bit more in detail the fisheries protocol. And you all probably have had a look at the manual. And we have done some updates. So I will talk about them, and I have to update the manual online. So anyway, bear with me. So the purpose of the fisheries protocol is to, it's very strange to see myself and nobody else, sorry. Is to develop a little bit more questions, more targeted to capture some fisheries related issues and to take advantage of this great network. So as you saw from the presentations, we have like an impressive network of collaborators and partners. And this is the people who expressed interest in the fisheries, in collecting the fisheries data. And this is continuously updated. So some people are jumping in and some people are deciding to collect a shorter version of the fisheries protocol. But yeah, looking at this, it just was a pity to not use such a network to potentially find some really interesting stuff regarding fisheries and aquatic environments. And I want to say also that we have, yeah, freshwater and marine in all the continents, I think. So I've done my best to integrate the fisheries protocol in the LICCI protocol. And here you can see how it is integrated. So how is, yeah. And it's only gonna take the qualitative part. So you don't have to do any surveys or include anything in the surveys for the fisheries protocol. Just it's just based on the semi-structured interviews and the focus group discussions. So from here, I just want to mention that, oh, you can see my mouse, right? But yeah, I just want to mention, because I won't mention it later, about the background data. So you are supposed to collect weather time series data. And I know it's very hard. It's much harder to get some water data, but it would be great if you can inquire in your sites, if there is some kind of record of water temperature, winds, and current changes. So anyway, I'll go into detail with the others. So I just wanted to mention that. So the data collection goals, here they are divided at the site, at the village, and at the individual level. It's also to prime you, to prepare you for how the app is designed. So because we have an app for the input of the data. So at the site level, we will collect, well, similarly to the LICCI protocol, just changes in aquatic species, focusing on their abundance, location, temporality, and size, about the main factors driving these changes, and about the adaptations made by the fishing community. Then at the village level, we will collect a narrative about the fishing livelihoods and their main food sources. I will come back to this later. We also want to collect a list of the known aquatic species, and this includes the target species, but also non-target species, so just the species which are there and people know them. And then we want to collect a list of the fishing techniques and the fishing grounds, so 2 lists. And then at the individual level, we want to capture changes in the catch composition and changes in the diet composition between now and 10 years ago. So here is just another diagram of how the fisheries protocol is linked to the LICCI protocol. So on the left, you have the LICCI protocol, and on the right, you have the fisheries protocol. And you can see it's quite similar. So the first interviews will be between 3 and 5 as well, with key informants. And we want the narrative, the list of aquatic species, the fishing techniques and fishing grounds. Then on the second part, we will increase a little bit the quota, the sample size, because we need a few more interviews for the changes in catch and diet. So, but then we will also collect aquatic lichis and lachis and the aquatic species list and these changes. And finally, in the focus groups, it will be very similar to the lichis focus group, but we will just try to emphasize on the aquatic environment, and we will also bring the lachis this time. But I will go more into detail now. So for the semi-structured interviews, we have the first section, and the sampling will be very similar, but so it will be between 3 and 5, potentially more, at least 1 per village. But if you have the time and opportunity, it would be great to have more than 1. And ideally, you would stop doing these interviews once you reach a saturation. So when the next interview is not really providing anything new to our the data that we want to collect. So this is done by convenient sampling. So you will aim to look for the people who are the more knowledgeable about fisheries and the marine environment, or the aquatic environment, sorry. And so basically the local experts and people who have lived there for at least 30 years. So they know the system very well. Ideally, we want to ask long-term fishers. And this is important in some cases, especially in fisheries, it tends to be quite divided. So sometimes women will do a kind of fishing that men don't do, and men will do the other kind of fishing, right? So for example, women are usually very engaged in gleaning, which is gathering of invertebrates. And that's also a kind of fishing, as how we understand them. So if this is the case, then you also want to include women involved in gleaning, for example. And for another example, a good interviewee would be a fisheries representative. So if there is a cooperative and they have a leader, usually all the people go with their problems, with their observations and things to this person. So he is like a sort of already a data collector. So you should try to aim for this kind of people. So anyway, let's jump. In this section, we want to collect, as I said, a narrative. So that's just to get a general overview of the fishing situation. And we want to collect things like the percentage of fishers, the types of fishing that are done in the village and who does them, how often people fish, the seasonality and different events in fishing. For example, when I worked in Bangladesh, they target this fish called hilsha, but it's a seasonal fish. So it's only for 6 months per year. So that's really important to know when you first arrive, right? So to know what you're talking about and not miss anything important. So then we also want to know the main target species. We want to know the main food sources. And we want to know the importance of aquatic sources in diet and income and anything else of relevance. I mean, I don't know, you guys come from all different places in the world with very different fishing settings. So yeah, anything you consider of relevance, you should write there. So it's better to have too much than too little information. Then in the first interviews, we will also start the list of aquatic species. But in this case, we will just ask about the main target species because we will need them to elaborate the fishing techniques and the fishing grounds lists. So to these key informants, you will ask what are the main target species, and then like record the list and then go through the other variables, which are here. So, and I recommend that you, if you can, buy or get a book or booklet with pictures and names of the aquatic species to help yourself identify them in the field. And you can show them to your informants and they can point and say, ah, yeah, this is the one, right? So then you can learn the name, because one of the variables you have to, well, the variables you have to record are the local name, the common name. So the local name is in the indigenous knowledge, the common name in English, the scientific name. So if you can, to the species level, but if you cannot, then you can do the one level up, like the family. And if it's not possible, then you will do a description, like a physical description. We will also record the habitats where it's present, and we will talk about it later in the app, but yeah, just for you to have an idea. The typical size range it has, so you can ask the informants, like, what's the smallest of this kind of fish and what's the largest, and then you record this range. Then the abundance in the area, that's different categories, like the most abundant species, quite common, very rare, or it's not here anymore, for example. Then you also record the uses. So usually it will be either food or sale, but then there are some things which are used for medicine and things like that. So you can record that. And the percentage of fishers who target these species. Then we have to do a list of the fishing techniques. It should be as exhaustive as possible, but if you cannot record all the fishing techniques, then you should make sure that the main fishing methods are recorded. And as I said, all this is to have a big overview of what all fishing is done and which species are there and how the aquatic system looks like. So in the fishing techniques case, we want to record the name of the technique, a description. So that would be just like another kind of narrative of how it's done. And I will show you an example later. Then we will write the target species. That's why we asked them before. So you have a general idea already what kind of species they are catching. We will record a list of the gear that they use, the average catch per trip or per fishing session. And in this case, for example, you can ask the informants, because average is always difficult. It's difficult for everybody to estimate if you go fishing every day, right? So you can ask them, what's a good day's catch like, and what's a bad day's catch? And then you can have a range and you can calculate yourself the average. And then the percentage of the catch that is used for consumption, for sale, and for the different uses. Finally, we have the fishing grounds. And for this, of course, it's better if you collect this information from fishers who go to this fishing ground regularly. And for each fishing ground, you will record the name, the habitats which are present, the distance from the village, and the travel time. So these two are to calculate the investment that the fishers do, right? And to see if it's kind of worth it or not in terms of what they get in return. We want to know the surface area, the average depth. In this case, with the depth, that can be tricky because a single fishing ground can have different depths. So in that case, if they are very different, then I would divide the fishing ground in two. But we can talk later if you have any questions. The target species which are present in this fishing ground, the fishing techniques that are used there, the percentage of fishers who go there, and the management regime. And for the management regime, it's also a sort of narrative, and it's the same as with the fishing system, right? You have to write what you think is important there. But in general, I would like you to record the jurisdictional characteristics of the area. So, for example, is it a customary owned land? It belongs to the government? Is it within the exclusive economic zone? Or is it international waters? I mean, I think for us, it's not really the case. And then you can narrate also the rules and regulations that are in place. How long have they been in place? Who set them? Who decided to put them? And who is in charge of enforcing them? And anything else you might think it's important. So for the second section of the semi-structured interviews, we will do the same, this quota sampling, as in LICCI, but in this case, we will up the number a little bit. Just ideally, you will have 20 to 25, if possible more. So in this case, you know, in the LICCI, we had these farmers, pastoralists, and fishers, you know, but probably in fisheries is more like this. You will find fishers who specialize in hook and line, fishers who specialize in net, for example, and mangrove gleaners and gardeners. And then you would have to do your quota sampling using these categories. So it all depends on your background work that you did. So for the second section, here we really do a free listing of all the species. So by now you should have a species list of the main target species. And now you want to ask each interviewee to free list for 5 to 10 minutes all the species they know. And then you write the list, and then you fill in the variables that are the same. So in the end, you will end up with this species list, aquatic species list for your village. And then, yeah, we also collect the lichis and lachis, drivers and lachis. But in this case, I want you to really emphasize the aquatic changes in the marine and freshwater systems, but also in the physical and biological systems. So it's not only about the species, but also, I don't know, silly example, but let's say someone or some people say that the water smells weird now or different, or I don't know, there is changes in the coastline and things like that. And yeah, I just wanted to remind you to separate the observations that they give you into the right lichis, right? So to make sure that you record the lichis that they are. So for example, let's say somebody says, the waters are more murky, so they are more turbid now, and because of that, the fishes don't come to the coast, and because there are no fish in the coast, the algae are overgrowing. So in this same observation, we have 3 lichis, right? We have the water is, so increased turbidity in the water, we have reduced fish in the coast, and we have more algae on the coast. So these are 3 separate lichis, and so just to remind you about this, because for me it's a little bit confusing as well. And finally, we want to record changes in the catch and diet composition. And this will be done through pebble games. Most of you know of pebble games because they are used in the survey in the main LICCI protocol, but here we will do them in the semi-structured interviews. For Yorgos, Maria, Andre, I think you didn't see this, so we can talk later about the pebble game, but basically you have 100 small stones, kind of, and then you give them to your interviewee, and you have some categories of, in this case, either fish species or food sources, and then they have to put little mounts. But we can talk more, and there is also a training video on the LICCI website on how to do a pebble game. But for each interviewee, because we are not doing the survey, we will collect some information, including age and gender, the years, number of years living in the village, the current income per month, the estimated income 10 years ago, and if they are fishers, then the main fishing techniques and the main fishing grounds. And so the goal of this is to compare, as I said, between now and 10 years ago, 1, the catch composition, and 2, the diet composition, to see if there are some nutritional changes brought about by climate change or market integration or other drivers, right? So, yeah, so for the changes in catch composition, the pebble game, you will pick either between 1 and 3 of the main fishing techniques. And of course, you will do this with fishers. And then ask them to do a pebble game for now, what's their catch like. So, and then you will end up with percentages, right, of the species that they get for each fishing technique. And then 10 years ago. So they should think about the past and do the same, but for the past. And then we want to have the same with the diet composition. And in this case, be careful, because we want to include 50% of women. So in many places, fishers are only men. And so you may miss some women. That's why we put some extra interviews in the semi-structured interviews section. So in this case, you would target women who maybe you haven't interviewed yet to ask them about their diet changes. So we have 50% men and 50% women. Okay. So then finally we go to the focus group discussions. And in this case, there is not much new things. The only new stuff is that we will bring the latches, so the adaptations. But I want to remind you to use your knowledge of the fishery and of the aquatic environment. So by now you must know everything about how they fish, how often, where they go, and so all this stuff. So then you can ask about the lychis a little bit more and ask them, so what about this fishing ground? And what about this thing that you mentioned, or that somebody mentioned in the interview, that this fishing ground has changed or something like that, no? So it's just try to dig a little bit deeper. And then with the adaptations, because we are really interested, we would like to write a paper about the adaptations in the coastal communities. So just to keep in mind that, adaptations from the community impact the aquatic system and species, and then these in turn impact back the fishing community. So it would be very nice if we could capture some of these in the focus groups, and especially be on the lookout for changes in the frequency of fishing, if it's increased or not, if they stopped fishing somewhere, if they abandoned or took a new fishing ground, and if there are new fishing techniques, new gear, etc. So finally, the hard part, the publication policies and ethics. So we use more or less the same publication policies as the LICCI project. For papers using the full data set, there are some topics which are already claimed. So if you would like to propose a new topic, you can write to me and I will collect all your requests and then contact you. And for people who have the same interest, then I will put you together. And of course, these papers must offer co-authorship to all the people who provided their data and to me. And then for papers using partial data sets, for example, if you are interested in doing a regional study, again, you should include, you should offer co-authorship to all the people who collected the data and to me, and and probably to the people involved from the LICCI core group. And finally, if you want to use this data for your own site only, you can do that. This is your data. It would be nice, so I would appreciate if you invite me, just because I invested some time in this, but it's up to you. And then just to remind you to please obtain free informed consent before starting any interviews, because otherwise we cannot use this data, and it's also just respectful and important.